Hi, Bison Nation. It's Miss Olson, and tonight we are reading our last few chapters in the great book that we're reading called Nugly. Tonight we're reading chapter 44 through 48. So let's get started. Chapter 44. What Nugly Didn't Know. What Nugly didn't know was this. Back in Southie, the entire McLaughlin clan, which meant honestly a sizable chunk of Southie, was absolutely frantic. Nugly, called Tommy. Have you seen this dog? Janie asked at one end of the street. As at the other end of the street, Annie was asking, have you seen this dog? Each of them thrust phones into the faces of pedestrians holding up magnified pictures of Nugly. Wait, said Nellie's boyfriend, who had been called to the scene to help with the search party. Since when does Annie have a phone? Oh, Nell said offhandedly. I gave her yours. Now come on, keep up. As the older McLaughlin kids fanned out across the long streets of South Boston, Sam and his parents were headed into Nugly's last known direction, south and west. Together, Mr. and Mrs. McLaughlin formed a sort of frenzy communications hub. Mr. McLaughlin had called the police first, was calling animal control now, and while he'd never have admitted if animal control didn't pan out, he was going to call City Hall next. Miss McLaughlin, meanwhile, was on the phone with the veterinarian's office. I'm so sorry, Dr. Shaneberg, she was saying. We've completely lost him. What should we do? As they hurried past Moloky Park, they passed Brian, who was trying in his own way to help, mainly by badgering a bewildered Little League coach. You must have seen him. His face is really, well, his tongue hangs out like this. And oh, he's got this brown stripe running across his nose. Pardon me, Dr. Shaneberg said, crackling on the other end of Miss McLaughlin's phone call. Did your son just mention a brown stripe? A brown stripe? Yes, he did. Miss McLaughlin waving Brian over. Why? Is it important? Just curious, Dr. Shaneberg said. Probably nothing. That's just the second time this year I've heard from a family about a dog with a brown stripe running away. I remember because they were some of my best clients, and it was right before they moved away to San Fran. Yeah, okay, Doc, whatever, said Brian. She asked you for your help, not your life story. And with that, he darted across the grass to stop someone else. Hey, buddy. You'll have to excuse him, Miss McLaughlin sighed into the phone. We really love this dog. I completely understand, said Dr. Shaneberg. In fact, drop me your location. I'm coming to look too. Oh, you really don't have to. But to Miss McLaughlin's surprise, Dr. Shaneberg had already hung up. Normally, she might have questioned why this veterinarian was behaving so oddly, but today she didn't have time. She just dropped her location on the phone as asked and then slipped her phone into her pocket to jog after her children. Sam, meanwhile, was hundreds of feet ahead of his family, currently so focused on his phone that he hadn't noticed anything happening behind him. The moment they realized Nugly was gone, Sam had begun posting on every online neighborhood group he could think of, alerting anyone and everyone of the lost dog in their area and what he looked like. Now each notification sent off simultaneous shockwaves of panic and excitement in Sam's stomach. The comments had begun to roll in. Yeah, I saw a dog like that. Nearly scared the life out of me. Intersection of Dot Avenue and Howell. I think I saw him, but he was running too fast for me to get a good look. He was headed south and west on Columbia Road. Sam closed the comment window just long enough to open Google Maps and make sure he was following the path laid out by the comment trail. He was, and with single-minded dedication too. A truck horn honked, and Miss McLaughlin cried out as Sam hurried across a gigantic roundabout, his eyes glued to his phone, devoted only to the pursuit of his lost dog, who, by the sounds of it, had disappeared into Dorchester 10 minutes ago. But why run that way? Sam was pretty sure why Nugly had run away. He was a little embarrassed about the idea of saying it out loud, and yet he was sure of what he had seen in Nugly's eyes. That much he understood. But why would he run to Dorchester? Where had Nugly gone? Chapter 45. Where, why, and how. You've heard a few times by now that when it came to the city of Boston, your average human would have found it impossible to navigate without help, let alone your average dog. And that was still true. But Nugly was no longer your average anything. After so much time spent walking, running, and hiding in Boston streets, Nugly had developed a sense of the city that went deeper than any knowledge of street signs or addresses. It was a knowledge that lived in the bones and the body, an unexplainable ability to sense where you were going by the way the terrain sloped up and down, the way the sun shifted from right to left, the way not just individual storefronts but entire neighborhoods smelled different from one another. So when Nugly ran back toward where he had once come from, back in another life, it wasn't really an intentional decision. It was guided purely by subconscious instinct, a yearning to return to what was familiar, to go to the last place he had felt even close to safe. All of which was how he wound up approaching half an hour later. A park so large it could have been a small city itself, one ringed by dense forest and containing a giant stadium, a ruin-strewn hill, and a strange-smelling village of huts and tents. Before he'd even known what he was doing, Nugly had run right back to Franklin Park. By the time he was passing the bear cages, though Nugly was very much knew what he was doing, he was trying to return to the zoo, to Lucky, to a place where wild animals could seek refuge. But could they? Could he? The zoo had already done its best to smoke him out the last time he was there. What was his plan now? He didn't have one. He was flying by the seat of his pants. So much, in fact, that he hadn't noticed what lined some of the trees and poles that he had just passed. Stapled, weather-torn posters, each of which bore a picture of a distinctive-looking face, and each of which had over torn-off phone numbers. Have you seen this dog? This was one more thing Nugly didn't know. The McLaughlins were not the only ones who had been looking for him. No time for that now. Nugly had places to be, and it was taking him longer than expected to get there. The last time he approached the zoo, it had been in the dead of night, and he'd been distracted by his porcupine friend. Now in the middle of the day, he realized that between the bear cages and the zoo laid a vast, flat playing field. The field that smelled distinctly of something familiar, something that reeked of cork and rubber with licorice tang so strong you almost had to wonder, did rubber actually taste like licorice, Or did all licorice taste like field hockey? Another thing Nugly had not known, between the bear cages and the back entrance of Franklin Park Zoo was the Playstead, one of Boston Park and Rec Department's finest athletic fields, and exactly the kind of place you might come to if you were, say, a small field hockey team who had been practicing in your neighborhood all summer long in anticipation of September, when competition season began and big matches started popping up all around the city. And one last very critical thing that Nugly didn't know, about 20 yards behind him, a hockey mom who was a prolific poster on community watch groups of several neighborhoods, at least one of them which she actually lived in, whipped out her phone to take a picture and replied to some urgent post she had seen online right before entering the park. Nugly was too busy panicking to notice any of these things, frozen in the middle of the field. The scent of hockey equipment reminded him of things he didn't want to remember: Lexington, Madison, the pain of looking into Emily Wan's eyes. But come on, what are the odds that he was actually going to run into any of those girls right now? Practically zero, right? Well, the odds must have been zero, because when he turned to start running again and promptly froze in place, it wasn't because he had seen any of the girls. It was because he had seen Katie and Shanna. "No way," Shanna breathed, pointing at Nugly with her hockey stick as if she had seen a ghost. "It's that." "It is," Katie said. "It's Emily. Are you here? He's here. The dog is here." Before Nugly could react, the loudest cry he had ever heard ran across Franklin Park. And with the same old incredible speed, Emily Wan was running toward Nugly and then throwing herself on him, hurling herself across the grass in the most enthusiastic, flawlessly executed slide tackle ever to turn into a hug. "You're back," cried Emily, as in really cried, as in was very much crying, real tears all over Nugly, tears that smelled just as strongly of joy as they did of sorrow. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have never listened to those girls, not even for I should have told someone. I did tell someone, actually, and it got so much better. But I should have done it sooner, because I just kept looking for you every single day. I never stopped. Mom!" The following sound was a strange combination of clattering and squishing. Lin John looked over from the parking lot, saw the scene occurring on the playstead, and dropped the industrial kitchen full of orange slices to the ground. Then she was running as well, not nearly as fast as her daughter, but with just as much enthusiasm, to throw her arms around Emily and thus around Nugly in turn. They all lay tangled up there for a while. Well, who knew how long? Nugly certainly couldn't tell. World and time had fallen away. There were only the Johns, their embrace, and the sound of relief and joy they were all making, until suddenly the world came back. "Who are you?" came a voice from above. "And how do you know our dog?" Chapter 46, Reunions. Here's a rough list of who was standing around Nugly at this time. 9 or 10 McLaughlins, one befuddled boyfriend, half a team of the Gorgons, Emily and Lynn Johns, several curious onlookers who just wanted to see what was going on, and huffing and out of breath, arguably the most demand veterinarian in southern Boston area. Here is what they all were listening to. But it was too late for me to go catch him, Emily explained. It should have never happened. I should have reported the bullying earlier, but I never wanted to make a fuss. But the moment he ran away, none of it mattered. I realized I wanted to make the biggest fuss in the world. I told my coach, I told my mom, the girls got kicked off the team, but it didn't matter. I was just so sad he was gone and that he thought I had done that to him. Some of the members of the crowd muttered to themselves, but Sam McLaughlin nodded in complete understanding. It's a terrible feeling, he said. I know this sounds weird, but I think Nugly heard us talking about him giving surgery to fix his face and he got upset, and that's why he ran away. Dr. Schonberg chuckled and wiped his glasses. Are you sure he just didn't get spooked by a loud noise or something like that? He asked gently. I know many dogs seem very intelligent, but I'm not sure Nugly can actually understand every word you say around him. Yes, he can. Sam McLaughlin and Emily Wan blurted this at the exact same time. They looked at each other with the exact same look of surprise. Then everyone looked at Nugly, who had just looked back up and wagged his tail. Well, said Dr. Schoenberg began. Wait, Emily Wan cut in. You're going to give him surgery? Yes, Sam said, but it's not what it sounds like. Mom, tell her what you told me. Yes, of course, Miss McLaughlin nodded and turned to address the crowd. At this point, it required a pretty wide turn. Most of the opposing team and the referee had come over, wondering where half the players had gone. Nugly needs surgery, Miss McLaughlin announced, not for how he looks, but for his health. We noticed him breathing heavily when he ran long distances or up and down our stairs, and occasionally he has trouble eating. We called Dr. Schoenberg and realized those were all lingering after effects due to the injury he got in the first place. We wanted to take him to the vet to get help for his respiratory and ailment issues, but his face was going to look exactly the same. Here, she smiled down at Nugly, and we wouldn't have done it any other way. We just love him the way he is. That's right, Dr. Schoenberg confirmed. The surgery part, the other part I accept on faith, but it reminds me, if I could just... Dr. Schoenberg's voice trailed off, and about 20 people craned their heads to see what he was doing, which it turned out was getting his phone out to place a call on FaceTime. Pardon me, he told the crowd while he was at the other end of the line began to ring. I just want to check something out. Whoever he was calling picked up. Hello? Nugly's ears perked up. Where did he know that voice from? Yes, hello, Lynn. Sorry to bother you unexpectedly, but this is Dr. Schoenberg. I was wondering, could you put Taylor on the phone? No, it couldn't be. The voice on the other end of the line, who Nugly now definitely recognized, said, well, I don't see why not. Taylor, could you come over here? And then it turned out It very much could be, because when Dr. Shaneberg turned his phone screen to face directly at Nugly, there was Taylor Van Dyke looking confusedly into the camera. "Taylor," Dr. Shaneberg said, "this is going to be a little confusing, but I remember how heartbroken you were when your favorite puppy went missing just before you moved away. So I wanted to make absolutely sure of something. This may be hard to make out over the phone, especially since he looks so different, but do you think there's any chance this may be the dog you lost?" The suspenseful hush that fell over the crowd was particularly impressive when you realize that it was just about none of them knew what in the world was going on or who in the world this dog was. But no one hung in suspense more than the dog in question. He had imagined this moment countless times in the last several months. What would happen if she, the first human he had ever fallen in love with, saw him now? Whether or not she would like how he looked was one thing. What really worried him was, would she even recognize him as himself? After all these months he spent finding himself, he wanted to believe that there was some true core to him that shone through. But what if she didn't feel the same? He didn't know. He didn't even have time to finish the thought before Taylor squinted at the stripe on his nose and gasped and cried out, "Nugget!" The crowd rippled and murmured, but all Nugly, all Nugget had ears for was the sound of Taylor squealing, turning away from the camera and yelling, "Dad! Dad! Come! Wait! Wendy! Come here! It's him! It's Nugget!" And as if the multifamily reunion hadn't been enough, there she was, appearing on the screen with possibly the most expressive face she had ever made in her life, Nugget's mother. Two dogs began barking joyously at each other from opposite sides of the continent. "Mom! Mom! Hi, Mom!" "Nugget!" The phone shook as Wendy tried to leap up toward the screen. "You recognize me. You didn't forget me." Nugly couldn't stop himself from asking. He knew it was childish, but if you couldn't ask childish questions of your mother, who could you ask? "I think about you every day," Wendy said urgently, "and I'd recognize you anywhere. You're family." The barking continued, even when Dr. Shaneberg pulled the phone back to his ear, trying to communicate what was happening to the elated but baffled Van Dyke household. "No, yes, he seems fine. I mean, he seems to have had a very busy social life, but I'm sorry, I'm going to have to put your dog on mute." Wow. That was Miss McLaughlin clapping her hands on Sam's shoulders. "Clearly, we all have a lot to talk about." "I agree." That was Lin Wan, smiling and extending a hand that Miss McLaughlin and Sam both were happy to shake. "Wait, Emily," said Shauna. "Don't we have like a game to get to?" "Right." Emily flushed, looking over her shoulder at the small field hockey army she had brought to the standstill. To the McLaughlin, she said, "I'm sorry, I know this is poor timing, but well, I'm the new captain, so." "Oh," Miss McLaughlin smiled. "Congratulations." "Co-captain," Katie cut in, pointing to the badge on her jersey. They don't make you the sole captain just because they catch you fighting with both of the previous co-captains. Emily laughed nervously, glancing at her mom to make sure she wasn't in trouble. But Miss Swan just shrugged and smiled. I've always said you needed to go out and be a real kid, and boy, did you ever. Then she turned to the McLaughlins as well. She's very good, for the record. Would you like to stay and watch? We'd love to, Miss McLaughlin said, and a half-dozen kids nodded in enthusiastic agreement. The kids nodded in enthusiastic agreement. Oh, okay. Okay, sure, great. Mr. McLaughlin clasped his hands together, a little bewildered by everything, but pleased that things seemed to be trending in an upward direction. But after that, is there anywhere else we could go and sit down and have a nice talk? Miss Wan's smile only grew wider. I happen to know of a good restaurant, she said, and Emily grinned as well. Oh, great. That's great. Mr. McLaughlin threw his hands up in the air as if to try to surrender control of a situation he had never actually controlled. Then play on. And will someone get a leash on that dog? Joked Dr. Shaneberg. Otherwise, he might run away again. I don't think so. I don't think that'll be necessary. Sam smiled down at his dog. I think he's done running away. Isn't that right, boy? Nugget, Nugly, not ugly, looked up at all his families gathered here together. The McLaughlins, the Wands, and thanks to Dr. Shaneberg, his first and forever family. Wendy and the Van Dykes. All of them looked back at him expectantly. It was a bit overwhelming, but love has always been overwhelming for Nugly. He had been born with more love than he knew what to do with, and over the course of his life, that love had lifted him up and torn him apart. What did you do with love like that? Looking at everyone now, an answer occurred to him. Maybe you went out and chose yourself a lot of family and loved them unconditionally and let yourself be loved in return, even if it was scary. So Nugly did the scary, overwhelming, excited number one main thing. He let himself be loved. Woof! Nugly leaped to his feet, ready to follow all his families wherever they went. Huh? Brian said. Maybe he can understand what they're saying. Professionally speaking, I doubt it, said Dr. Shaneberg. Read the room, Doc, Brian said. With that, all Nugly's family set off toward the play stands, chattering happily among themselves, their favorite dog in tow. Well, almost all his families. Briefly, Nugly stopped to look back at the entrance of the Franklin Park Zoo. Love can do a lot of things, but sadly, it can never lift him back over the gates of... Oh yeah, that's right, Emily said, noticing this right away. Mom, didn't you say that the shelter found him living at the zoo? We should totally take him there sometime. Whoa, wait, we have a wild zoo dog, Tommy breathed. Awesome! Well, maybe love could do anything. Emily, Katie exclaimed with uncharacteristic fervor. I know you have just been reunited with your miracle dog, but we will forfeit the game if you keep stopping to appreciate the miracle. Coming, I'm coming. And with that, they really set off for the last time. Promise. Chapter 47, How Nugly Looked. It would be very easy to tell you how Nugly looked. You've read about the exact subject quite a bit already. It might have been more interesting to tell you how Nugly appeared. For example, as Nugly darted his way, and that at the edge of the field, yanking the leash every time Emily dribbled past at lightning speed, he looked like any other unruly dog, despite dog, desperate to chase after the whatever zooming ball had flown through the line of sight. But to the informed observer, Nugly appeared to an extent that even Dr. Shaneberg had to admit was uncanny for a dog to be not simply unruly but proud, as if he were cheering on Emily while she led her team to field hockey glory. He was not alone in this either. With the combined forces of the McLaughlins and all their hangers on, the Gorgons cheering section that day was twice as large and half again as loud, as rambunctious as it was ever before. Brian and Tommy had managed to download noisemaker apps to their phones. Janie and Joey jumped up and down every time Emily got a shot on goal. And even though Sam had his hands full trying to keep Nugly from yanking the leash out of his grasp, he still managed to clap and exclaim under his breath each time one of those shots went in. He had plenty of opportunity to do so. It's seemingly no time at all. Emily and her cheering squad led the Gorgons to a decisive victory. Nugly could not have appeared happier. Another example, later when the Wands, McLaughlins, and Van Dyks, who were calling via video chat, sat down together at the Wan Fu's outdoor seating area, Nugly may have looked a bit twitchy with his head whipping back and forth from one human to the next, but he appeared to be completely bestowed with each one of them, and every part of the experience, especially the shrimp roll, when the shrimp rolls came out and Annie began dropping them clandestinely under the table. I mean, this really is a wonderful establishment, Miss McLaughlin enthused. I can see how he must have loved it here. Thank you, and thank you, Miss Wan smiled at Mr. Adfolalu finished laying out the condiments and pulled up a seat next to them. But you've clearly taken very good care of him as well. Look how much he's filled out. Nugly beamed at the compliment. His sister Pepper would have been so proud. Maybe he could stay with both of you, Taylor suggested over the phone, like he could go back and forth. Taylor, Mr. Van Dyke said, I don't think that's our place too. That sounds great, Emily and Sam said, in complete agreement once again, and once again stopped to look at each other in surprise. What did you say your name was? Emily asked. Sam. You're a great player, by the way. Under the table, Nugly perked up, notably since his current perkiness level was already remarkably high. Normally, when Sam spoke to strangers, he did so quietly and shyly, as if worried about taking up too much space. Heck, he spoke that way to his own family. But now, just introducing himself to Emily, Sam had sounded not just confident, he sounded comfortable. And Emily smelled much the same way. It was as if the two of them recognized something in each other, a resonant quality that made each of them feel instantly at ease. Thanks, and thanks for looking after Nugly, Emily said, still adjusting to the new name. I can tell he really likes you. Thanks, Sam grinned. He clearly is crazy about you. Maybe we could walk him together sometime. Have you ever been to Castle Island? Whoa! Emily's face lit up. I'd love that. We have a castle on an island? We really need to get you out of this restaurant more, said Miss Swan as she sighed. Chapter 48. One final example. A month later, when Emily and Sam took Nugly back to Franklin Park Zoo, he may have looked a bit out of place. A domesticated pet wandering through a global spanning assortment of exotic animals. But he appeared completely at home, eagerly pulling at the leash the moment the doors opened for visitors. Geez! Sam almost fell forward trying to keep up with Nugly. Guess he really wanted to come here. Maybe we should have brought him here earlier, Emily said, grabbing Sam's elbow and pulling him back upright, even as they followed Nugly's brisk lead. I don't know. Sam smiled warmly. I think Castle Island was worth it, and I'm really glad you showed me Roanoke Park. Since that day at Wan Fo, we've been going on joint walks every week. It was a great way to hand Nugly off as he shuttled back and forth between the triple-decker and the Wan Fo. But more than that, it was becoming a ritual Sam and Emily looked forward to in and of itself. It was like they hadn't had friends before. It was just that athletic Emily's friends had mostly all been on her sports team, and shy Sam's friends were mostly all, well, his family members. Oh, and a dog. They both became good friends with a dog. Where's he going? Emily laughed, picking up the pace as the dog in question rounded the corner and nearly skidded on a patch of fallen leaves. It was a beautiful October day in Massachusetts, and the dustings of red and yellow littered on the ground, giving the zoo an even more vibrant air than it usually had. Wherever Nugly was going, he seemed to be changing his mind sharply as he zigged one way and zagged the other way. In truth, he had been about to detour by his old friends, the red pandas, to say hi before remembering they were primarily nocturnal animals and probably all asleep. He felt this would be complicated to explain to Emily and Sam, so he chose to keep running toward his original destination, racing past the gorilla hut, past the sheep pens, and up to the cage of the porcupine exhibit? Emily asked, hands on her hip, looking completely unbothered by their sprint, while Sam put his hands on his knees and he huffed and he puffed. Why in the world would he take us here? But the answer was already crawling out of his log, ready for another day of entertaining children. The same as the last day, the day before that, in a life in which nothing normally would ever change or, yeesh! Lucky had leapt a foot in the air and released a squeal so loud that Sam and Emily both jumped as well. Nugly, though, just smiled. You'd think someone reacting to him like that was a frightening apparition, might have upset Nugly, but he didn't take it too personally. After all, he thought Lucky was a monster the first time they met, and look how they had turned out. And indeed, once he touched back down on the ground, Lucky squinted at the face in front of him, wrinkled his nose, and said, "Kid?" "Hi, Lucky," Nugly smiled. "What do you think of my new look? I got it for you." Lucky paused, opened his mouth, closed it, took a moment to groom his quills as if he couldn't be bothered to reply too quickly. And then he said, "You went out and got some character, kid. Good for you." And with the happy reunion that followed, Emily and Sam were let in on another secret they'd never be able to convince Dr. Shaneberg about if they tried. The fact that their dog and a southern African porcupine were best friends. As Nugly bounded forward to the fence, happily barking out the entire saga of what happened since he last saw Lucky, he looked like a lot of things. Like a lightning streak of brown and white dancing around the warm brown and black of Lucky's amused and patiently listening face. Like a newborn puppy again, leaping and yipping around Sam's and Emily's ankles. Like a dog who had been running all his life, just from the way he moved so fast that he practically blurred. But he appeared to be done with a certain kind of running forever, because he wasn't running away anymore. He was running straight toward all the people and places he had chosen that had in the end chosen him back. Nugly was with his family. He was finally home. Oh, I love these kind of stories. I love a good dog story. So as we finish, I'm going to show you a few of my pups that I have been reading to as we have read this book together. So there are a few of my fur friends. I hope you all have enjoyed the story as much as I have. And it's okay if you cried a little bit and you laughed a little bit and you enjoyed the book. Because honestly, at the end of the day, this was a great book. Bison Nation, I hope you have had a great time reading this. And we will see you soon at school. Have a good evening. Bye.